Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, July 9th, 2020. Dars highlights, Shaykh's comments to see this Assyrian Faqir who has a vision of the shining pearl and stars dancing around it in a circle. The Shaykh says, "You saw the niche, the mishkat, consisting of different stars. At the middle, at the center of it, is the resplendent planet. Kamishkat, fiha misbah, al-misbahu fi zujaja. The stars here are the glass container. They give a reflection of the resplendent planet. The stars are the divine names, and the all-comprehensive planet is the singular name of Allah. It is the hidden name, al-Maknoon. It's the dot. Ismullah al-A'zam al-Maknoon, God's supreme hidden name." In a similar manner, the whole Quran consists of names and attributes, and the hidden supreme name is that from which all the properties and acts and attributes and names of the Quran unfold. It's the dot, the nuqta, it's the secret. Not a name, it's ana nuqta, I am the dot. I am the name that carries that secret by which God dictates what will be and what was. In this sense, the wali is the hidden supreme name by virtue of the hadith of Nawafil. He becomes the hand with which he grasps and so on. God created Adam in his image. Who knows the Maknoon? Who knows this hidden name? The bearer of that name. What's your knowledge of the supreme hidden name with respect to Adam? You just know Adam, not the name he's carrying. You can't specify it for him. Or for the Prophet ﷺ, you may say the Prophet is Mohamed on earth and Ahmed in heaven. But he has many names. Yasin, Taha, Tahir, Mustafa. And you can't specify his name. He carries the nuqta. The same for the awliya. Ali says, I am the dot. I am the secret of the ba. The nuqta, the esoteric reality. The arc that consists of many dots. The nuqta is the root of all other dots, by virtue of the verse An-Najmi idha hawa, by the star when it rises or sets. Now without the star, this najm, you can't see the new moon. When you're observing the new moon, let's say of Dhul Hijjah that's upon us, you do so by focusing on the najm. There's a specific star that tells you when the sliver of the new crescent and where it'll appear. And from there you can see the hilal right after it for a short time. This najm, in other words, this star, is the secret of the new crescent. It's not the crescent, but it's the secret that points to it. If you see the star and you don't see the crescent, you don't fast. But the star tells you of the manifestation site of the new crescent. Ali says in a similar manner, I am the dot. I am Zahir, I'm the outward manifestation of that inner dot that shows itself at Maghrib when you see the Hilal. Or at Fajr, the same star tells you that it's time for Fajr. A second Najm appears at Maghrib and one at Fajr. So Ali is the outward manifestation of the inner secret of the Ba. His body, speech, attributes, movements are the secret of the Ba. He is a name, a sir, and an outward, a movement, virtues, acts of the Ba. So the hidden name contrasts with its outer disclosures. And the entirety of Ali, his name, his lineage, his knowledge, his traits, and so on, they're all representations of Ali. Similarly, the entirety of Adam points to the name of, or the hidden supreme name, with respect to Adam. So this hidden supreme name remains forever hidden. Even if you divulge it, it is not grasped except by the one who carries it. No word can describe it, and its affair remains forever beyond grasp. Now this brother sees the stars dancing and moving, swimming in their spheres, like Sufis dancing when they are in the divine presence. there is a movement in the heart. The heart is not in a state of rest. God creates rest, which is death, annihilation. Then He looks at this rest, and at the center of it, there's a circle that's created, and now you have a center and a circumference. The gaze of Allah Azza wa Jal, and astaghfirullah for anthropomorphizing this discussion, we're seeking here to explain. So the gaze is a sir in sukun, in stillness, that yields movement and generates motion within the stillness without leaving its own sphere. It just remains in the sphere that God circumscribes for it. Some imagine that the center is moving. It's not. It's the sir of God's gaze. The dots around it are moving, but not the center. And those dots around it cannot go beyond the niche, the mishkat. In Surah Tabarak, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. God creates death, then life. The gaze is the secret of life. Or it's taking a handful of His light and says, be Mohamed. That's life. That's in contrast to rest, sukun, which is non-existence. God's gaze is life. It's the nadra is al-hayat. And the gaze is what generates motion, multiplicity, and plurality. Things are alight with movement and rubbing and friction. Here you have an allusion to the verse يَكَادُ زَيْتُهَا يُضِيءُ. Its oil well nigh is set afire, even though it doesn't touch it. Things are set afire with movement, with rubbing and friction, and there's a stillness that's given fire. It's like an intention without the act, which is why we say the intention is better than the act itself. If you intend something beautiful and don't do it, you're still rewarded for it. If you intend something sinful and you don't do it, you have no sayyi'ah, no ugly deed is counted against you. You actually are rewarded for not doing the ugly deed. If you intend a sin and you don't do it, there's no punishment. Why? Because it's non-existent. It's adam. It's hidden. It's concealed. As for what's beautiful, what has a connection, al-hasan, it comes from God. Al-hasanatu min Allah. And the ugly deed is from yourself. The ugly deed is non-existence, because you are non-existent. The beautiful deed is from Allah, and it subsists by virtue of God's self-subsistence, His qayyumiyah. And just thinking about something beautiful that's connected to Allah generates compensation, because it has an ontological status. So we say God creates sukun, rest, which is non-existence. This sukun, if it had an intellect and wished to create itself, like the philosophers say, things create themselves by themselves, it just remains in non-existence. It has no hasan, no jannah. The sukun won't step in jannah by God. It produces itself by itself. Now when the real gazes at non-existence, God causes it to subsist. It generates al-hasana, and life of God's gaze from pre-eternity generates that motion. In a similar manner, Junaid says, whoever believes in our words is among the elect. Why? There's nothing from ourselves, it's all from God. If you believe in our words or in our existence, even if you don't give us bay'ah, you're among the khassa, the elect. The one who offends us, similarly, God wages war against them. How and why? There's no sword involved. He thought to produce something negative with respect to something elevated and pure. And whoever offends a wali, God wages war against them. If the wali were to fight you, that would be lighter. The wali fights you when he senses your war, or when he hears your war and perhaps he fights you, but if you attack his honor, he might supplicate God against you. In contrast to God, if you offend the wali internally, even for the sake of God, then he wages war against you, Allah. Now, going back to sukun and motion. Sukun discloses in the pearl that shines, this jawhara, because light shines from it to itself. The pearl is self-sufficient. Its oil well nigh shines forth, even though fire doesn't touch it. The other stars around what you see would become extinguished if it were not for that central piece. God says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ, I swear by the locations of the stars, the setting places of the stars. Which ones? The shining ones. How do they shine? They rotate around the sun. Each star has its own sun, and its motion lights it. Their locations are the Quran. As for the stars that don't shine, we don't call them stars in the first place. They're meteorites, they're rocks, sukhur. There's no Quran in their setting place. As for the star, its mawqi', its setting place is the Quran. And they're described as Quran maknoon, a hidden Quran. And the rocks are darkness, lowliness, sufliyat, and evil comes from them. There's no khair ulwi, elevated goodness coming from them. There was a question from Egypt, who has a dream on Friday that he enters to the Shaykh's home with his mother, and the Shaykh enters into a glass room overlooking the street, and Ahmed says he stands at the door. Shaykh comes out, Ahmed kisses his hand, the Shaykh prays for him, and he said, don't stand here, I am in a khalwa. And the Shaykh was smiling, and then he says, Ahmed said, I go outside, I look at him from outside, and a madman appears, a majdub, and he's playing with a stick in his hand, and he gives the stick to the Shaykh, and the Shaykh gives Ahmed the stick, and then the Shaykh looks at Ahmed from the room. Then another majdub comes and he's screaming the name Allah, and he comes up to Ahmed and he says, say Allah. Then another majdub comes with 3 sticks, and he gives them to Ahmed. Shaykh comments, Sidi al-Buzidi has a book called Al-Adab al-Mardiyah, the praiseworthy etiquette, about how to comport oneself with the Shaykh. And in it he says, walk behind the Shaykh, don't sit by his door. Sitting at the door of the Shaykh is a breach of etiquette with the Shaykh. The majdub, this divinely attracted or holy fool, this madman, is carrying 3 sticks. Each stick represents one of the hidden alifs, alifat muqaddara. In the sensory realm, the stick is a representation of the lower self, of the nafs. What's in your hand, O Musa? It's my asa, it's my nafs that helps me to lean on it, and I use it for my sheep and so on. And God says, throw it away. Strip yourself from the 3 levels of al-ammara, al-lawama, and al-mulhama. The 3 things that Moses uses his stick for. God says, throw them away, and then it'll become mutma'inna, a soul that's serene and at peace. Now, in the reading of the divine name, the 3 sticks are the 3 hidden alifs. Ha, lam, and lam. You read the ha with the ha, then with the lam, and then with lamul ma'rifa, lam of love, lam of gnosis. And if you read the 3 secrets with realization, then you will cease to have wujud. Hence Rabi'a is told, from where to where, O Rabi'a? And she says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To God we belong, to Him we return. She sees no return to herself, no origin, no place of departure, no destination. That's the sweetness of wayfaring. As for the madman, the majdub, may have ecstatic utterances. They may say, Ana Allah, I am Allah. In other words, I don't exist and God is Ana, God is I. And only God can say Ana. This is the state of the wayfarer in the presence of his Lord. They taste a transcendent meaning. You yourself may not be receptive of the words of the majdub, but he divulges his esoteric or inner secret in a reality, and there's no embellishment in what he says. His station is exactly how he describes it. As for you, you have tasannu', sort of stilted formalism and fake pretensions. And if you have that, your affair will be disclosed. And the Shaykh said, let me tell you a story. There was a righteous man who had 2 murids, and they were brothers, and he was training them. This man was a baker, the Shaykh, and the baker had his 2 murid brothers serve him in his bakery. One of them, after 6 years of working for the Shaykh in his service, says, Shaykh, I served you for all these years, and I'm tired now. Let's say he works for 10 years. He said, I worked for you for 10 years, and I'm tired. Give me the sir by virtue of the Prophet ﷺ, and by virtue of my service to you. And the Shaykh says, your time has not yet come, But the murid says, if you love me, O Shaykh, then give me the sir, and I will live upon that sir and die upon it. The Shaykh gives him the sir, and the brother leaves. As for the second brother, he continues to serve the Shaykh. He doesn't have an ambition in attaining the sir. He just listens and prays for more of God's bounty. Then, when the time of the death of the Shaykh approaches, the Shaykh says, come here. The murid comes. He says, listen, my son, I'm going to die. I want you to take care of my children until all of them grow up. And I want you to teach them the craft of baking. And then after that, you're free to go. You're no longer obliged to serve me. The brother obeys. He now has a new mission, to take care and raise the children of the Shaykh. The Shaykh himself has died. Who will give him the sir? The Shaykh is gone. The Shaykh who can give him talqeen, who can transmit the sir, is back with his Lord. And yet, the second brother is serving the children of the Shaykh until the youngest one grows up. And each time a child marries, one of the Shaykh's children marries, or a big event in their life, the second brother would go to the grave of the Shaykh and speak at his grave, give him news, just empty in his heart, wanting to obey his Shaykh and sort of having moments of intimacy at the gravesite. Even though he has mastery over the path, he wants to continue his job, and he wants to completely fulfill it. You'll find these kinds of stories in the Ibriz, especially the first part of the Ibriz of Abdulaziz Dabakh, which you tend to skip because you want to just get to the esoteric part in the second half. But this first part is important. So let's continue the story. This second murid raises the children, and at the end he said, well, the last child has grown up. I'm going to go to the Shaykh's grave. So he goes back, the second brother, having raised all the children of the Shaykh, goes back to the Shaykh's grave, and speaking with reverence and fear and presence of heart, he says, the Shaykh, I've done my job. Suddenly, the dead Shaykh stands in front of the murid from his grave, and he says, my son, you've done well. Now close your eyes and take what secrets appear to you. The murid closed his eyes. He was not in a state of fear or panic, despite the grandeur and the tremendousness of this vision he had. He closes his eyes and he sees disclosures of Allah, and he understands God's sciences. Then the Shaykh says, now you have idhn, you have permission, but I want you to go to this specific tribe and be a da'i there. Go call people to God at that specific place. So the faithful second brother packs his bags, says goodbye to his children, bids his family farewell, and goes to the second province, where he finds a trial occurring. Someone was about to be crucified. There was a court case, and there's a heretic in question. Someone like a Hallaj. Who was this person? It's his first brother. The first brother had went there after receiving the sir from the Shaykh, but he's misunderstood. He doesn't understand how to bring down and descend the affairs according to the levels of the Sharia and to speak to people at their levels. And so, the second brother is asked to be the arbiter, or to intervene in this case. And he begins to intercede on behalf of his brother. He says, I ask you to forgive him. I came from city X, and they say, come just for this. And so I came all the way here just for this, to intercede. And I came as a representative of Shaykh X, and I came to intercede on behalf of this brother here. And at first they protest. The villagers and the judge, they protest. They said, no, but this heretic, he says things like, there's only Allah under my hood, and so on. And so the second brother begins to describe the body and how it has 360 joints and the representation of divine light, and he gives details about the human body and how many angels flow through the body, until the judge begins to have some fear, and he doesn't want to execute a bodily execution of this man, and he forgets about the deeds of the heretic, and he plunges with this for the second brother into the sciences And each time he has more and more hayat, more and more fear in his heart, and more sense of shame, and he lightens the punishment of the heretic step by step, until the second brother brings out the first, and he's innocent, and he frees him. The first brother, the heretic, is expelled out of the town, and then the heretic brother, the first brother, tells the second brother, "I'm so sorry for what I did," and the second brother says, "Hide your affair. Don't speak anymore." And the first brother, who was on trial, asked his second brother, "What did you do to arrive at all of this? How did you gain all of this knowledge?" And the second brother says, "I just finished my job. I raised the children of the Shaykh," and then he stood at his grave, and he said, "Close your eyes." I closed them, and he gave me these secrets. And so the first brother, the heretic, goes back to the grave of the Shaykh, and he repents. So the story here, the moral is, one does da'wah, calling, with idhn, with divine permission. The second brother goes and calls with divine permission. He has permission to leave the mishkat, the niche of the Shaykh, and the other goes back to the grave of the Shaykh. So you have to speak with idhn, with permission. You're not here representing a philosopher or an intellectual group or a trend of thought. You're representing God, and you can't do that without fulfilling the conditions. And if you don't, you pay the consequences in the here below. It's not about hurrying through this. It's about having permission, even to be elevated. في بيوت آذن الله أن ترفع. After elevation, after idhn of dhikr, then in homes God gives idhn to be elevated, then His name is invoked. You wish to remind others without dhikr, without idhn, and without rif'ah. Who gives permission? Allah gives permission. Permission for dhikr and for elevation. Everything in the basmala is in the ba, and the ba in the sir of the nuqta. You are the nuqta. You have idhn. You are the nuqta. You display the hilal, the crescent, the entire lunar month. Only God points to God. Only the One points to the One. God gives permission of the One, which is the alif, the hidden alif, to say قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. God gives you permission to speak of divine oneness, to speak of tawheed, to say قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Until that has reached you, you may be a muwahid, but you don't have permission to speak of it. Hence the Prophet ﷺ says, the best thing that I said and the prophets before me is La ilaha illallah. In other words, those with permission say La ilaha illallah. God gives me and permission to convey La ilaha illallah. You can't tell even your own self La ilaha illallah, to say nothing of saying La ilaha illallah to others. When you convey to others, the One is speaking to the One. There's 11, like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ is 11. The One speaking to the One. And it has to do with if it represents the One fully. Hence the alif is hidden. The gaze of the One speaks of the One. Here Allah Ta'ala gazes at stillness, at sukoon, and places in it one, a najm, a star. And when that star najm, when it rises, بِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ, with the star they seek guidance. As for the nujum, the plurality of stars, they give news of the location of the singular star. And each mawqi' gives news of tawheed, of the names, of the attributes. It's all a display of tawheed. It's all Qur'an in a state of non-differentiation, of ijmal. I am the city of knowledge. All the locations of the stars around me point to me. I am them. Ali is its gate. He is the dot of the najm of guidance. That gives reports of the entire city, not just part of it. Who has idhn? Ali has idhn. He is its door. He has the right to speak of knowledge of God. No one else. Regarding hidayah, guidance, the Prophet says, my companions are like stars. Whoever you follow, you're guided. As for Ali, he has knowledge to speak of ilm tawheed, knowledge of divine oneness. And who did Ali give idhn to speak of ilm tawheed to? Sayyidina al-Hasan and Sayyidina al-Hussein, and so on down the tree. As for you, you read the Futuhat, you read the Hikam, you read a bit of Nabulsi, and then you begin to open your mouth. You should fear for your tongue. Because if we were living in a different age, you would have been crucified. Every limb, secret, tongue, and movement in you has to proclaim Tawheed. and you see no wujud to yourself, and you proclaim that wujud is only God's, and no one shares wujud in his wujud. Ya Allah, let this wujud flow in our hearts with permission of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Let God's wujud flow through us. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.